introduction. I'm going to share my screen.
Great. Well, it's great to see folks. We also have some incredible people that know a lot about sustainability. So I look forward to the end when we have more of a dialogue and discussion, hopefully. What I wanted to do before we get started is, as people think and kind of explore what sustainability is, I'd love to see you put in chat how you define sustainability. And then we can reference it along the way and also at the end during the Q&A. So definitely, if you have any thoughts about what sustainability is, how you defined it, that would be great. I'm going to start real briefly. It's going to be myself, and I work for the Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. Leah and Joel are joining us as experts in their own right that are going to be talking about some of their work as it relates to sustainability. We are a citizens-based group and this is our crew that runs things. So you'll see basically we're centered out of Duluth, but of course now we're throughout all of Northeast and coming to you from there. So the way we function is we have 4 focus areas that this group of citizens address: agriculture, resilient communities, natural resources, and clean energy. And they all relate to building a sustainable world. So as we look at what this might mean and how we function for the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, is we have 3 bedrock principles: community-university partnership, community leadership, and sustainability. So all of our work has to have these components to it as we look to better integrate the university with community challenges. So as we look at what we actually do, we have projects. And right now we're in the last phase where we have our citizen-based work groups. They've just ranked and prioritized the projects that have come in from the communities to kind of share with us their perspective on how the project relates to sustainability, how it relates to the work around equity and justice, how it relates to that university community base. And then we provide small dollars, but some of the small dollars can have big effect as we bring some of the university resources into play. And that can provide a much greater depth and breadth. So the idea is, how do we get communities challenges incorporated by the university and brought into the research by the university? And that's one of the main goals of the regional partnerships. So in looking at sustainability, what is sustainability? We happen to have one of the leading experts on sustainability, a guest on our call, Rumbi, and I'm sure she'll have thoughts and questions as we move forward, as she worked with the United Nations sustainability work around the world. And so as we look at sustainability, we're going to just touch on it briefly, and we'll look at social aspects of sustainability. How do the people fit into it? How do we sustain the whole network? How do we bring justice and equity into sustainability? So that's the social branch. So as we look at the next branch is the economical. How do we address fair economics? How is the energy in compared to the energy out? And what form does that come in? So it has to make sense ecologically as well. And that's the third point. Not only do we have to think about preserving and securing nature, but we also have to look at, now that we've degraded the earth, regenerative type of aspects in terms of how do we renew and make the land, the soil, the ecosystem tighter, more resilient, and more adaptable to the changing climates. And so we're going to pull this over into Leah, and she's going to share from her angle, her work related to sustainability.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Carmaker. I am the Low Income Housing Vista at RSDP. David suggested that we started with a poem, and I don't have a poem, but I have a poetic statement from a planner back in New Jersey who I love. His name is Damon Rich, and he works at a planning firm called Hector. And he said, "Can the basic materials of shared spaces conjure up the fighting spirits that brought them into existence?" So that's an ethos that I carry with me throughout my work, that the things that we build and the things that they're made of can rouse something powerful within us. And on the screen, you see me with one of my architectural models on my head. And that was in college when I was getting a Bachelor of Science in Architecture. I graduated in May of 2019. I went on to do some of what I call the traditional architectural work, that is designing at an architectural firm. Did that for about a year after graduating, or did that during undergrad. And then after that, I was itching to get my hands dirty and to put theory into practice. So I moved to upstate New York and I worked on a construction site there. And that's why you see me flamethrowing a bench. I got to make lots of benches with that huge saw in the upper right-hand picture. And I really developed an appreciation for building there and for wood. But I sort of felt tired of working purely in residential work, and I had always been interested in the intersection of buildings and politics and supply chains and systems and organizing, and I had never worked in the nonprofit sector. And then COVID hit, and I was so lucky to find this job opportunity at RSDP. So I get to work on a lot of like a variety of projects that have this intersection of sustainability and building. So the first question is, why build sustainably? What do buildings have to do with sustainability? Buildings are connected to environmental inequity, and I think that's especially evident in housing. According to the Duluth Vulnerability Assessment, more than 1 in every 3 climate vulnerable individuals in Duluth live in economic stress, and those at risk usually carry a heavy housing cost burden, including higher utility costs. So what does it mean to be climate vulnerable? We typically tend to think of people who, say, might live near the water and their house might be underwater in like 30 or 50 years. But in addition to living in a place that's vulnerable, it can also mean that your house makes you vulnerable. Your house could be not properly sheltering you. In Minnesota, you could be really cold inside your house, or it can be pushing you into financial precarity, right? It's very often in Minnesota that people have to choose between utility bills and food. So I would argue that these higher utility costs, that is climate vulnerability in itself. And then the NAACP has stated that environmental injustice, including the proliferation of climate change, has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and low-income communities in the United States around the world. And that's the inequity, that this isn't evenly distributed. And the way that we build matters, right? In the US, almost a third of our carbon emissions come from residential and commercial buildings. And we're not getting better at building them. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency reported that between 2005 and 2018, residential emissions have increased 32%, which is crazy to me. And how do buildings primarily contribute to carbon emissions? So I can't see you, but raise your hands if you have ever done this in your home. Raise your hands if your homes have ever been cold and you needed to supplement with a space heater. Raise your hand if you have high utility bills. So this is all indicative of the same problem, that our homes are not meant to retain heat, and in other climates they don't stay cold when they're supposed to stay cold. So that's the bulk of what's causing the emissions in our buildings. It's in operation while we're heating and cooling. What are the solutions to this? I'm fortunate enough to work on a variety of projects at RSDP that demonstrate different solutions. The first is Green New Deal housing, which is this beautiful, multifaceted effort, but I like to summarize it as an effort to make it more affordable to own net zero homes and to build them. But Green New Deal housing develops net zero homes that rely on clean energy and use the homes to train a new green collar construction workforce. So there are all these facets to the project, but right now I'll touch on net zero homes. What is a net zero home? A net zero home is one that produces as much energy as it consumes in a year on site in a renewable way. So our homes are using solar panels to capture the sun's energy and power the house. And when it's overproducing energy, it's giving that to the grid. And if it's a cloudy day, then the grid is getting its energy. The house is getting its energy from the grid. Net zero homes optimize energy efficiency. They have ultra low utility costs. They're demonstrated to increase in value over time, and they remain safe during extreme weather events. They don't burn natural gas and use the sun's energy, which is renewable and clean. Other than producing energy, how are Green New Deal's homes less energy expensive in the construction? Let's see if y'all know how to read an architectural drawing. Could someone tell me what all that pink stuff is? You can just pop it in the chat. Does anyone know? Give you like 5 more seconds, 10 more seconds. Okay.
We got somebody that says insulation.
Yeah. Okay, you got it. I don't need to be lecturing you. You know what you're doing. Yeah, that's insulation. So on the left, we have a code built wall. I should have told you that before. We have a code built wall on the left. So by law, you have to build in Minnesota to that standard. Then on the right, we have a Green New Deal housing wall. So on the left, you can see that there's a lot less insulation. And if you've ever opened up the walls in your homes, you'll see that you have the studs in your house. So essentially those like wooden columns, for lack of a better word, and then you have insulation in between them. And so what that does, the studs are still exposed to the cold air outside the house, and your home is letting out a lot of heat. And then essentially what Green New Deal housing does is it provides an extra layer of insulation on the outside of the house that wraps the house. So you're essentially putting a jacket on the house. You have almost double of the insulation on the foundation and a lot more at the roof too, because this corner right here is an extremely weak thermal point. You're essentially just putting a jacket on the house, and that's how you're preventing it from losing heat. And so the code built wall is 20% less thermally effective than the Green New Deal housing wall. So imagine that you're going out in the middle of winter in northern Minnesota, and you're taking your gloves and you're cutting off 2 of the fingers. If the house is translated into clothing terms, that's how how it's less efficient. Oops. In addition to the wall construction, it's also more efficient in layout. You have your living spaces oriented to the south, as well as the majority of the glazing. Glazing is windows rather, are another thermal weak point. So when you're orienting them to the south, they're capturing the sun's energy. And then you'll also see that their solar panels are oriented to the south to capture the sun's energy. And so this diagram sort of describes how Green New Deal housing is this comprehensive system that makes this reproducible, straightforward, easily scalable system. I touched on the solar panels, I touched on the windows and the wall construction, but in addition to that, we have all electric energy appliances in the kitchen and that are heating the house. And you have ductwork that's inside the house. So if we're extending this glove metaphor, if you're outside with hand warmers and do you want to keep the hand warmers on the outside of your gloves, or do you want to put them on the inside of your gloves? Right? We want to keep the things that are heating our house inside the warm space. And so right now I've just been telling you about how this house is more energy efficient. But how does this project address inequity, right? Because inequity is not just a design problem. So we sort of touched on this idea of climate vulnerability and economic precarity, but like, let's think about it logically. If we have a person who's vulnerable either climatically or economically, why is that? We've established that might be because of their utility bills. Why are their utility bills high? Well, it's because their house isn't constructed the way it should be. Why is that? Well, you can only really afford a net zero house if you can afford an architect to custom build your house, because net zero housing or net zero construction isn't standardized. Why is that? Our workforce isn't big enough. We have a workforce shortage, at least in Duluth, and the workforce that does exist doesn't know how to build like this. And the code doesn't really require that they build like that, and the products to build that way are still expensive. So suddenly we're talking about a problem that's much bigger than just housing itself. Luckily, Green New Deal housing creates a systemic solution to a systemic problem. Again, I'm emphasizing this scalable, standardized, reproducible model. So not only are we trying to create these straightforward homes that can be reproduced, but we're also using our construction sites to train a new workforce for workforce training. And we're focusing that training on underinvested communities. And until we're able to break ground in construction, we're hoping it can happen in fall of 2021 or spring of 2022, doing public engagement. So if you find yourself in Duluth, please visit the Duluth Folk School. There's great coffee, and then there's also this exhibit on Green New Deal housing if you'd like to learn more. We also have a full-scale wall mock-up of one of our walls. And so in addition to building sustainably, sustainability can materialize in different ways in buildings, right? You can build sustainably, and then you can build a building, or rather, sustainability is also a building that provides services that we don't have. So I'm also fortunate enough to work on a project called Manji Achai, which is a land sanctuary for people of color in northern Minnesota. So it's a land sanctuary or a retreat center, a healing center, and this space just doesn't exist in Minnesota yet. So I'm fortunate enough to work with two wonderful women, Rebecca Ndozi, who's the co-founder, and Abimbola Asojo, who's an architect and interior designer, computational designer. She has a focus in cross-cultural design. And then there's little old me giving architectural support to this work. And we have a lot of ideas for what this space will look like. We keep describing it as this really luxurious and restorative home, but truthfully, we're not in the design phase yet. We're in the pre-design phase. And what is that? That's a lot of research, a lot of focus groups and surveys and interviews. We're trying to bring people on site. So people don't typically think of design like this, but this is an incredibly important part of design and thus of sustainable design, because we're making an effort to engage community stakeholders in this, in the process and in the design, those who are usually excluded from this process. So we're doing this thing where we're engaging them, we're designing based on their feedback, developing it, giving it back to them, receiving more feedback, and then finalizing the design that way. And the last thing that I want to touch on is that in addition to building new buildings, there are also retrofits. 2/3 of the building area that exists today will exist in 2050. So decarbonizing our building stock is an important aspect of decarbonizing our building stock. Will be retrofitting our buildings in addition to building new ones. And if you look at the embodied energy of a building, most of it lives in the structure of our buildings and in the skin. So if you're just able to reuse the structure of a building, you're already recapturing 50% of that building's embodied energy. And so I got to work with Jacob Mans, who's an architect at the School of Architecture at the U. And we were able to engage his students to work on an affordable housing complex in Hibbing. And the Hibbing HRA was starting what was called a RAD conversion process, which essentially the complex was in extreme disrepair, and they were able to open it up to private funding and thus up to renovation. So we were able to research with their students about greening the space, about making the spaces more accessible, and making the public spaces in that complex more usable. So that's an extremely important part of how we build. And I'm going to throw it over to you, Joel.
Thanks, Leah. I'll just get my screen going here. So I'm Joel Bransky. I grew up in Duluth, spent a lot of time outdoors when I was a kid. You can see my huge smallmouth bass there. I caught it in Neander Lake up by Ely. Moved away for about 10 years, around the US and abroad and came back, and I really wanted to do something with natural resources, and AmeriCorps was a great fit. So that's what I've been doing this year. I'm going to talk to you about 3 projects I'm working with. I'll spend most of my time on this first one, the Forest Assisted Migration Project. And for this one, I just wanted to start with this picture. I took this at like 3 a.m. one night. I just couldn't sleep. I went for a walk. It's a beautiful dusting of snow on the roads. And I saw this leaf stuck in the crack, and I said, there's no way that can be. So I took a picture. I looked at it later, and I realized, wow, that's actually a species I collected a lot of seeds from this fall, and it's supposed to be even more common in the future in northeastern Minnesota. So that's kind of my hook. The question is what species that is, and I'll actually I'll reveal it later. So kind of the basic problem is that the forest in northeastern Minnesota is under a lot of stress, diseases, pests, management issues, and probably the single biggest factor is climate change. And that's what this project is trying to address. You can see here on the left, there is kind of our current biomes, and on the right, where they're projected to go. You can see up in Cook County right now, boreal forest is solidly there. On the right here, so this is 2 different models with 3 different emissions trajectories. Up on the left, upper left, in kind of the best case scenario, you have you folks becoming mostly mixed forest, boreal, retreating all the way up to like Thunder Bay. On the bottom right, in the worst case scenario, Duluth becomes prairie, and yeah, you folks are solidly broadleaf. So that's kind of where we're going. Just giving an image to this, right now we have St. Louis County on the left and what is projected to be in about 50 years. Kind of a broken oak savanna, very different than what we have now. We want to maintain that canopy so we can maintain our wildlife, our economy, and that's what this project is about. A lot of these distinctive species like spruce, fir are going to decline, and what's going to hopefully take their place are species like basswood, red oak, yellow birch. Those species are kind of the focus of this forest assisted migration project. And to get there, to get to a new canopy, there's really 3 arms of the project. There's tree seed collection and research. There's the growers network, and these are small farms. They're going to take that climate forward tree seed and grow it to 1-year-old tree seedlings, and then they're going to sell it to reforestation agencies who will take those seedlings and plant them on land up here. I'm just going to talk about each of those in turn. Tree seed collections first. There's 3 big ideas here. We want to get species like I was talking about earlier, yellow birch, red oak, white pine. We want to get populations from southern Minnesota, central Minnesota that are already adapted to warmer weather. And we also want to get diverse genetics, a lot of different tree parents, so that no matter what happens with the climate, we have a good, diverse, resilient forest that can withstand some effects of climate change. Meredith Cornett from the Nature Conservancy and Julie Ederson from UMD have done a lot of the research and coordination behind this. You can see here, this is our whole list, all the species, they're kind of dubbed climate forward. The green ones are the species we collected from this year. Just a little personal side to collecting seeds. I found it really fun. It was kind of addictive. It's like with blueberries, you just keep picking and picking, except with tree seeds, you might find yourself way at the top of the ladder and kind of reaching for that last cone. So you got to take it easy. Different foresters and grad students helped out. And I think here we have a first poll. It's just kind of an interactive thing. My question is about how many tree seeds did we collect in total this fall?
You can take your mouse, and if you drag it over the questions, you should be able to click and we'll get some feedback. Getting close. Okay, we're gonna go for it. I'm gonna share the results for everybody.
Ooh, a lot of good guesses. Answers about 400,000. So it's not a crazy amount, but it's a really, really good start for especially the first year of this project. And that'll be about exactly how many we need to grow our orders for the first year. Just wanted to share this. This is my office for a few days while I was collecting tree seeds. It was beautiful. Really lucky to be able to do it. Again, the species we were looking at, mostly white pine. I know white pine's common right now, but again, the idea is to get genetics from central Minnesota, southern Minnesota, and bring them up so that those new trees are adapted to warmer weather. Here's the answer from before, red oak. And we got plenty of those. Yellow birch, same deal. Fun thing about yellow birch is these seeds are tiny. They are super small, and they come in these little things called strobiles or catkins that are kind of like flimsy cones. And in a single one, there are so many seeds. You can see my high-tech carrying container there. There's probably 5,000 seeds, 20,000 seeds. So it's hard to get the catkins, but when you get them, you got a lot of seeds. So this year, the seeds were collected through a grant. Next year, we're hoping to create kind of a new system that'll augment the older one. We're hoping to work with SFA farmers to train them on how to collect tree seeds on their woodlots. They'll collect the seeds and they'll just sell them directly to the growers in the north. The idea is this will be kind of community driven. It doesn't rely on grants. It'll just work through the market. It'll be financially sustainable. And also, there's other reforestation agencies like the DNR, U.S. Forest Service, the Nature Conservancy, who really need seed collectors. So this, I think, has a big potential to expand. Talking about the second arm of the project, the people who are going to take those seeds and actually grow them. Got a lot of partners on board. Started all this spring with the UMD students who started calling the farmers and gauging their interest. You can see that's kind of the map of where they are now. You might know some of these people. We don't have anyone in Cook County right now, but as the project expands, we're hoping to more and more people will sign on. First year, the farmers are going to plant about 85,000 tree seedlings total among those 15 farms. And that is to meet orders of about 53,000. So they're just planting a little extra so that, you know, if there's crop failures or anything like that, they can roll with the punches. They'll be doing some research for UMD and, of course, experimenting, figuring out what works, sharing information between themselves. Just going to talk a little bit about where we are right now with the growth. One interesting thing about tree seeds is that they need what's called stratification, most species, and it depends a little bit on the species, but the basic idea is you need to mimic the conditions of spring, so you got to get the seeds wet, and then you got to get them cold. Different species vary a little bit, but I did just want to share some of David's pictures because he's growing trees himself. He soaked those little tiny yellow birch seeds. I think they kind of look like a red pepper paste. He wrapped them up, got them nice and cozy next to the fire. And I think he might have actually gotten taken a little bit by surprise. They sprouted really early, so he had sort of the tough job of taking each one of those tiny little seeds and putting it into a pot. There you can see Forest of the Future growing. And I wanted to also say a big thank you to Matt Yankee, who's the greenhouse manager at UMD. He's been growing these beautiful white pine. It's so satisfying to see the seeds he picked in the fall just start to actually grow. It's beautiful. So just wanted to talk about kind of where we're going from here. This year we're growing containers. You can see those little plugs in the greenhouse. Next year we might try bare root growing, where you put them straight into the soil. Just talking a little bit about the people who will buy and then plant these tree seedlings. Huge partners in Nature Conservancy. They guaranteed the farmers a contract for 40,000 tree seedlings at a really good price. So they've been a huge partner on the project. Minnesota Power is also buying a fair amount of tree seedlings, counties, SWCDs, the North Shore Forest Collaborative, and also private landowners, kind of a la carte, maybe through Open Food Network. So these tree seedlings will be going on the land and starting to form the new canopy of the forest. Just, you might be interested to see what these will look like when they get delivered. On the left is what the farmers will be delivering next spring. You can see that they're called plugs, and they're kind of a tight package. They're a little shallower, which is really good on the shallow soil up in northeastern Minnesota. On the right, if we were to do bare root seedlings, you can see they're maybe a little bigger and just kind of have a different look. Different landowners prefer different things. You can stay updated on the project. This is our webpage over at Arrowhead Grown, and yeah, we just have some information there. You can watch the trainings if you're interested. And yeah, these are all the partners on the project. Again, big thank you to the Nature Conservancy. They've been amazing. I'll just talk really quick about the two other projects I'm working with. Land Access Alliance. So The purpose of this project is to hold land in trust so that everyone in Northeast Minnesota can have equal access to food. It's an emerging organization. It's led by women. I think the underlying philosophy is to develop a healthier relationship with the land, see ourselves as caretakers and residents rather than simply owners. The long-term goal of this project is to hold land in proportion to what the communities in Northeastern Minnesota are going to need to feed themselves in the future. You can do that by holding the land in trust, maybe by holding the land conservation easements on the land. But again, the hope is to just kind of reduce that financial barrier to working farmland. Also, with any equitable food system, foraging and gathering will be an important part. And we always recognize that this land was Ojibwe territory before we were here and Lakota territory before that. It's really important to the group to build relationships with the tribes and build in tribal perspectives wherever we can. One of our members is from the Bois Forte Band of Ojibwe. I think this project is getting its sustainability from two angles, kind of. There's the environmental one, of course. Local food creates fewer emissions. Better farming practices are better for the soil and the water. I think there's also a fairness aspect. All sorts of people, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, are simply priced out of owning land. So the hope is that with this project, people from those groups are going to be able to start farming more easily. We've had great support from the university and student interns. One of those, Lucy Carlson, is actually, I think, up in your neck of the woods in Cook County. And they've been amazing. So the group is really starting to pick up steam. We've got a website. If you're interested, you can take a look. Some of our members actually just participated in the Indigenous Farming Conference. They were on panels. And I think in our next meeting, we'll be picking our board, finding out who's going to incorporate, and really just start to put those nuts and bolts together and see this work come together. So it's pretty exciting. All right, last thing, Northland Food Network. Definitely the most interesting thing NFN did this year was the Shovel Ready shared gifting process. Shovel Ready project just means that the project is ready to go. It's ready to make an impact. And shared gifting in this sense meant that 7 projects presented their ideas to community voting. It was just on the Zoom call. And the community just voted, and 3 winners from that received the grant funds. So the community chose who was going to win. And actually, one of the projects is from Grand Marais, so I have a second poll here. The question is, which project is going to be in Grand Marais?
Again, take your mouse and drag it over and let's take a good guess.
Ooh, looks like people knew. Most of you got it right. The answer is community cold storage. So this is a great project. It's ready to go. It's led by great people. It'll make it a lot easier for farmers to store their produce all times of the year. Excited to see that one go. Just wanted to say also, we got big support from Healthy Foods, Healthy Lives, IRRR, Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency, as well as the Entrepreneur Fund. So thank you so much to all those organizations. And it's just exciting to see the community participate and start building a stronger food system. So I think with that, I will pass it off to David.
I'm going to close it out here with some miscellaneous projects. So I'm going to just give you a whole kind of run of different projects. So if any catch your mind as something of interest, jot that down and put it in chat, and we can do some more deeper dive into some of these. But along with the housing, along with the forestry and all these cool projects that we've had the great opportunity to work on, we're working the Family Freedom Center, and it's empower the Black community for entrepreneur skills and training. We've been working with the childcare development, which is really hard to do in rural Minnesota, is how to make it viable with the changing demographics. Try it in COVID, makes it even harder. So trying to work with some of the kinks and use this as a model as they build and move forward with that project in Finland. Multi-chamber root cellar. This is using brand new septic tanks that failed the pressurization test, and then using them to make, since they can't be used as a septic tank, using them as a root cellar. So trying to capture that energy that's been already made in a root cellar. So this will be compared against a walk-in cooler and conventional root cellar. That's happening this spring. Hemp trials, working on identifying species and varieties of hemp that can be grown in our region. This is mostly centered out of Bois Forte and other areas, and it's primarily a people of color operation between the Native people and the Black community with 40 acres agriculture cooperative. So another neat project. How can we, replace bags with hemp products? How can we do some of these new innovative things that can be grown in a crop that grows very well with very little inputs? Looking at livestock control of exotic species. So that's research that's going out in Aiken County, or research that's right now concluding about looking at farm internships and what type of internship creates future farmers. And so this is possibly leading to a Minnesota Farm Corps or other type of internship programs, so farmers can learn how to do it better, and interns maybe will gain better access. Because right now if you can afford to take a summer off, you can be a farm intern. So how can we build a program that eliminates that privilege to be able to do that and bring some equity to that exposure? Wild harvesting in Fond du Lac, working with their elders to preserve their understanding and share it with the next generation. North Shore Forest Collaborative, really active group that has been working up and down your shore on trying to figure out how to renew the forests of the shore. In response to COVID, we've run 2 different fundraising opportunities with less funds, less criteria, less paperwork, to try and deal with the crisis along the way. And we had a couple projects out of Grand Marais and Cook County, trying to get access to food and things like that. So everything across the board, and it also was key funding to getting the farmers markets going throughout the region. Some farmers markets were able to use this money to make it possible for them to move to that next step. You might even see in that center picture, that's the Grand Marais Community Center, where the funds helped towards some boxes for youth feeding. We also have the opportunity to leverage our funds with university research. This is a project, if you have cats, we're going to want to talk to you, because it's using biochar in a cat litter. So the idea is to have 100% natural cat litter with biochar to help with the absorbent, and to also to make cat litter something we can compost fully and not landfill, as we have a major landfill problem coming to Cook and Lake County as the landfill fills in the next 4 years. Huge cost increase, and on that, a waste to resource effort, identifying technologies, and I'll hopefully be working with someone with Cook County to try and see if we can come out with a Cook and Lake County solution by pulling the organics out, pulling 50% of the organics out. So that's something I'm just exploring now. So as we look at sustainability, this is the final stretch. Think about your own homes. A lot of you are doing things. What can we do in our communities? And to do that, to kind of explore kind of the thinking, I'm going to just quickly go through the balancing of the social, economical, and ecological integrity of the land through our own farm, my family farm in Finland, Minnesota, where we grow food. We have 120 acres. The lake is our back 80 acres, and the front acres is our agriculture. And so how do we manage our land? We're actually doing a forest stewardship management plan to plan for the next generation, the next canopy. And Lisa and I spend 6 months sleeping in this tent in the back 80 with a great place. It's actually a nicer room than our house room, and a great view. And so looking at how do we build sustainability and our systems of harvesting, whether it's deer, moose, or other game, but also wild rice and berries. How do we capture the honey in our system? So how do we work with and find a balance with our wild harvest as it relates to our consumption, our income into our bodies? We're growing food in our field. This is a picture of our farm. We started with livestock, and we also ran a CSA that ran up. I know Wilkerson's there, one of our members of our CSA from the years. We ended that last year, but we're still doing online and farmers market. So the social capital, how do we build a social system and an ecological system that's also economic? So this is building our farm up from which grew nothing, grew about 4 inches tall, and then the crops would die. So building the soil, building the crops, intensifying the growing in smaller land. So we need less land to grow our food here in Cook and Lake County. By increasing our fertility, we can carve out just a smaller footprint as we feed ourselves in the region. So looking at all of these different ways we can grow crops and also grow community and also grow soil. So farmers markets, growing seed. Where do we grow the crops from? From seed. So we're working with several up in Cook County, several in the Finland area and elsewhere to see if we can build a network of seed growers. So this is our lettuce seed growing to seed. And we need about 20 individuals to hold the genetics good. This is a broccoli that's a solstice broccoli, big, beautiful heads. But commercial growers don't like it because it heads out throughout time. Well, that's perfect for a garden. So as we're shifting to garden type seed production, having solstice growing in your garden means you'll get a big head, and then a few days later, you'll get another big head, and then a week later, another big head. So different type of strategies for gardens versus commercial operations. And this is one variety that I think will become real popular in our area. Also garlic, researching garlic and growing garlic seed, and figuring out the best timing. Regenerating the soil. A lot of our old farms actually have been eroded and loss of fertility. So how do we grow more food and grow better and deeper and richer soils? And so we've been able to do that on our farm, and now we store 174,000 pounds of carbon on an acre, where we used to store less than 5,000. So 5,000 to 174,000 pounds stored by increasing our fertility and organic matter and our carbon in our soils. Win-win. Now we can take a 6-inch rainstorm without it running across the surface. So soils as being the fundamental basis of all sustainability, but especially as we build our food systems. As we look at climate change and the huge change in the amount of carbon in the environment and the temperatures and the increased violence of our storms, we look for how do we mitigate that? So on our farm, we're 100% off grid. We're solar powered, wind farm powered. Even the car that we are delivering our vegetables in, I converted it to run on waste vegetable oil. So this was waste oil from restaurants that we then filtered the water out and cleaned the particles out from the French fries. And in this case, it was from Asian type of food that had a lot of other parts in it. And so also coming up with wastewater systems that use less energy, collecting rainwater, all of these things are ways we can, in our own homes, in our own farms, in our own lives, figure out how we can do it a little bit differently. And then we have to adapt, because guess what? As Joel was mentioning, the climate is changing. It has changed. Parts of Northeast Minnesota have already gone up 5 degrees. So we're going to be getting a little more extremes in the center of the continent than other places. We might be buffered a little bit by Lake Superior along the shore, but our region as a whole is changing. So we're using now agrophenology, using a calendar based on phenological indications, like when does the serviceberry or the Juneberries bud out? When does it flower? And using that to determine when we plant, not a calendar which has become less reliable. The other thing we are doing, Leah mentioned Majia Chai, is imagining a different future. So we are in talks with Maja Chai at our farm to offer up, to give up and co-own land for this healing center. So that's something else, is since 98% of all agricultural land is owned by whites, we're gonna have to figure out, how do we share some of this land? How do we share some of these resources? How do we sell to the next generation? And so that's something we're just taking on personally and in discussions to see. And so that's where we're going to end our formal conversation. And I know there's a whole bunch of really amazing people on the line here that would love to, we can maybe have more of a discussion or an exchange, or start out with question and answer and see what we can learn from each other.
This is a great time if you want to unmute yourselves, or if you want to put questions in the chat. If you want to stay more anonymous, you're welcome to put them in the chat and I'll read them off. Otherwise, you're welcome to unmute yourself and share any questions that might have come up. They covered a lot of ground, and I know there's still things that maybe you were inspired by personally, or have questions about, or have been working on in your own community. So this is a great time to talk about any of those.
I have a question, John, here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I have 30 acres north of Tofty, and we've been building just cabins and stuff on that for about the last 12 years. I've been wanting to ask two questions, or look for two resources. One is how to actually get rid of the trees we have on there and what to replace them with, hence the interest in your program tonight. Do you have people we can call to look at forestry plans and create kind of a long-term strategy for a small piece of land like that? It's within the Superior Forest. That's what I'd like to know.
Sure, I can jump on that. I'm actually having a forester come this Saturday, spend 2 days on our land to do a forest stewardship project. They basically identify your goals, John, your goals on what you want your forest to be used for, what your priorities are, what your passions are, what your philosophy, and they will come up with a plan based on your land, which might have different slopes and different types of habitats to lean into different types of species, and give you a plan. And when you do that, you are then eligible for tax credits from your property taxes. And so that's the incentive to do that. So the DNR has it, land stewardship project, land stewardship, forest stewardship plan. Look that up, and you will then be able to find someone, and DNR runs that program along with other foresters. So
Thank you very much.
The other thing is the North Shore Forest Collaborative. They're right in your neighborhood. There's some incredible, great people. So look up North Shore Forest, and you will find that collaborative and become a member, and you can learn from each other. And there's some cost share dollars and some education opportunities that you could jump in on.
That sounds great. Thank you.
John, we also have a presentation that is recorded on our website that is from the North Shore Forest Collaborative that I would recommend you watch.
Thank you. I will do that.
Other questions?
I have a comment and a question. I live in Grand Marais, just moved up here from the cities a few years ago, and I've actually took a rock wall building class with you, David, several years ago at your farm. That was really fun. You have a beautiful, beautiful farm. But it's kind of sad to hear about the boreal forest changing. I know it's a reality, but I feel really sad about it. And because I just planted a white pine on my property, and I'm, doing all that. So is it the research so strong that that's inevitability is just that we got to get going now?
It's very strong probability.
Mhm.
I've been kind of a naysayer. I don't believe it. kind of thing, living here in Finland. And, you know, the idea of this forest transitioning into grasslands, I'm like, oh, come on, that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
Again, we might be buffered a little bit by the lake, but now when I'm looking at the fir and spruce die and the openings it's creating and the grasses that are appearing, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, if you look at the foundation and the foundational species, they are struggling. I look in my forest and it is sick. And so that is the urgency. And that's why this idea of a forest assisted migration project, if we had brought it up 10 years ago, we would have had so much pushback by DNR, by all these groups. But I've been surprised how little pushback there is because it is so prominent, it is so clear what's happening to the forest, that there is a lot of support for the broadening of the genetics. And primarily our first wave is the trees that are already here, but we don't have broad enough genetics. And when they test tree to tree, like a seed from central Minnesota and a seed from northeast Minnesota, and they grow them side by side, the one from southern Minnesota or central Minnesota will outgrow the local seed. And so
In this region.
in this region. So the evidence is very clear, especially with certain species. And Joel, this is all new to Joel. He was teaching English in Korea most recently, and he has captured so much knowledge and information about it by doing and taking part, that a lot of the success of this project of getting the seeds and doing that is also on Joel's shoulder. So I'm really proud of Joel, and he has a lot more to share on it, but it is beginning to feel like it is going to happen. And so what we need to do is get these trees big enough so they can become the seed trees of tomorrow.
Thank you.
There were two quick things. I think adding a little more weight to it, a little more urgency. Superior National Forest just announced that they're doing their own assisted migration plan. And the DNR, I think, is changing their seed collection protocols to allow people to collect seed from further south. And the other thing is, there's a couple articles you might be interested in. I will just drop them in the chat as files.
And again, just a reminder, anything that's going in the chat, I'll be sharing with you as resources in a follow-up email, so you don't have to take all the notes. Rob, did you have something you were saying? I think you were.
Yeah, David, you had your drawing of your gray water system. Is that something that the county is supportive of if people want to put gray water systems in, or is there feedback on that, or?
Yeah, the alternative wastewater system I designed has been installed in maybe 7-8 places throughout Northeast. The staff have changed both in Lake and Cook County. So I know the earlier staff that I had, designed it within that time frame were all supportive. I don't know how it fits with new changes to the 70-80 regulations. We're still using it on our farm, and it's certainly something that can be explored because it was designed to meet the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency parameters of subsurface distribution. So, yeah.
Great, and we have a
We
couple.
also have Roomby, who is a friend and on our board of the RSDP. And Roomby did work in India and Africa around the UN sustainability goals. So at some point, we should get the definitive definition of sustainability from Roomby on here. Other questions, other thoughts?
Yeah, we have a couple in chat. David, how did you measure the carbon in your soil?
Yeah, I took those 3 slides out right at the end. Basically, scientists use a 6.7-inch range, and they've weighed the different soils to get an average weight. And then organic matter is measurable, and organic matter is 58% carbon. And so if you take the percentage organic matter in your soil you delineate the carbon portion relative to the 6.7 inches of soil, you get a carbon measurement that is pretty helpful in determining what is actually sequestered. And so all you need is organic matter, times it by 0.58, and then you use the calculator based on the soil weight, and you can get a pretty good guess on the amount of carbon in your soil. And if we were to nationally go from our 2% organic matter to 5%, we'd be able to incredibly store a lot of the carbon that has now been released. So from past practices and future practices.
The next question is, what is the policy on population carrying capacity on defined lands, like population control?
Human or wild?
Maybe both, because it didn't specify.
Well, I know in our country, we really avoid the talk about human population. I did do a study years ago on our current population in Northeast Minnesota, Northwest Wisconsin. And according to our population and the land available, that's average or above and already cleared, we have 3 times as much land available that could grow all of our local food on that cleared and above average land only, and grow all the food for the 500,000 people in Northeast Minnesota, Northwest Wisconsin. And that would mean $1 billion that is currently leaving the region would stay in our communities, in our processing plants, in our gardeners and farmers' land. So in terms of carrying capacity for humans, we have enough land in Northeast Minnesota, Northwest Wisconsin to grow all the food we need. But there are other aspects to sustainability, like Rumbi just put up. There's social aspects, there's other aspects towards sustainability. We all know the population of the moose is being challenged, and that's partly because of the population of the deer has spread and increased, and the cross-contamination of some of the pests related to each other. So there's a lot of carrying capacity issues. Also in our agricultural land as a whole, because it's gone from the average of 5% to 1 to 2 to 3% max of organic matter in our soils. We've lost 1/3 of our topsoil in this country. So overall, we have lost a lot of capacity to sustain human life, and our forests and other things have lost capacity to sustain wildlife. And so we are in a time that we must act on all levels of sustainability.
Thank you. There's another one. Is there any mycology work being done in the region to assist in soil production, enhancement, sorry. It's broken down into 2 sections.
Oh.
So any mycology work being done in the region to assist in soil production?
I'm sure there is. I don't know of any real hard science that's happening in our region on soils. I do know that soils are being studied by everyone, and farmers are becoming soil experts. And there are clear ways to build soil. There are clear techniques. There are clear, easily done mechanisms to build soil. Harder in the forestry, harder in larger tracts, but there is no lack of understanding of how to build soil. And earthworms being incorporated into our environment has posed another challenge, because what they do in that soil, that forest floor, is they break things down quicker. And in that rapid breakdown, and when you have rapid breakdown from excessive tillage, you have the microbes grabbing the nitrogen, grabbing the organic matter to process things. And so all of those things change the way organic matter is broken down, and carbon dioxide is released, and it's more vulnerable. So there's lots of different factors. I don't know of any particular hard science research, but I'm sure someone's doing it. So we could we could look into it and see if we can find some.
And then I see in here the definition that was shared about sustainability. I could read it off, but I would love it if you, because it's your information, if you want to speak to it for a second, that'd be great.
Hello, friends. Thank you so much for the great presentation. I'm actually finding out that the great presentations are even more wholesome than this definition, because this definition does not take into cognizance the current generation. So I'll just read the most quoted definition comes from the United Nations World Commission on Environment and Development. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And in this webinar, Joel has even gone further, because he is making sure in the forest assisted migration project that something intentional is happening to ensure that the future generations are well taken care of. And sustainability to me is an ecosystem. It's huge, and it's a multidisciplinary field that needs systems thinking and then integrative interventions. And when I say it cuts across disciplines, maybe the best way is actually what's happening within the regional sustainable partnerships. When you look at Leah's Green New House buildings, and then you look at forest assisted migration, and then you look at the food systems, all the projects, they bring into action sustainable development, and they should be case studies to policy, because our current ways of production, they are capitalist, and they are damaging the ecosystem. So as we talk about sustainable development, we cannot do it blanket, but we have to come back to the local. And these local, the regional, states, they should act as case studies on how different localities should actually replicate these efforts.
Gosh, thank you so much. That was wonderful. On here, we have another question from someone. Could you also suggest resources for soil amendments for gardening in Northeast Minnesota? So looking for some soil amendments.
I guess I'll jump back in. You know, your organics like manure, but don't forget to put a cover crop in the fall that will grow a crop that is the food for the soil the next spring as you incorporate it back in. The average acre needs 6 to 8 cows of food. So imagine having 6 to 8 cows underground working and needing to be fed and doing the processes. That's how much energy needs to go in an acre of ground. So cover crops is a green crop you grow and incorporate. Cover crop, if you have a dead crop, that incorporates. Dead crops will create fungal, and green crops will create bacterial populations in your soils. So put in manure, composted, put in as much organic and stuff you can get in without bringing too many weed seeds in to that process. So you just want to build, and on a small plot, you can make it very fertile very quick. Best composted material, fertilizers that are organic based so they don't kill other things in the soil. So those are the types of things to build your soil up. Leaves in the fall, all sorts of things, anything organic.
We have one more question that just came up. I was wondering if Leah could tell us about some building materials that are biodegrade or have less of an impact as waste.
I mean, the go-to material is wood, I love wood. But one thing to consider with wood, at least it's really important why RIMBY is speaking to policy is because, wood, it comes from the trees, and we think of it as green, but like it's still shipped in. A lot of the plywood that we use is still shipped in from the Philippines, so you have to consider like the shipping costs, and a lot of it, even if it's coming regionally, it's extremely like energy expensive to kiln dry that wood. I know David mentioned hemp. Hemp is an incredible building material that can be used for concrete, so it can be structural. It can also be insulative. Yeah, and another thing to be wary about with wood products, especially as like green building is starting to become a lot more trendy, especially because you're able to get bigger spans, is that like a lot of it is going to have like glue in it when you're getting into like glulam products. So yeah, I'm basically just giving you a list of products that aren't going to be biodegradable, but as they come up in my head, I'll speak to more.
Well, that is everything I got in chat. So I'd really encourage you to put either more questions in chat or unmute yourselves and ask more or share your ideas. This is a great time to talk about what could be.
Yeah, what are other people doing in their own homes? What are they trying and checking out?
Hi guys, I'm Ashley. I guess I'll go first. So my boyfriend and I just moved here from Wyoming. We're living by Hovland, and our landlord is a master gardener. So growing organic vegetables and having a background in farming is something that I'm super passionate about. And I guess I more so want to know if there's other people in the community of Grand Marais that I could work with or have conversation with, or different Zoom meetings to make a difference, but to also educate people, because that's important to make change. So yeah, that's kind of what my question is.
Contact Diane Booth at Extension Community, and she can connect you with the farmers lists. There'll be a whole bunch of people you can connect with.
Ashley, I'll put that in the email I send you to, her contact information.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd also say that there is a lot of community effort. There's a Northwoods Food Association group up here too that might be an interesting one for you.
So what type of materials were you talking about for internal cladding on buildings? You had it on the drawing there. There was internal cladding. And what kind of materials would you use for that?
Internal cladding, are you talking about like gypsum wallboard?
That's what I was wondering. Is that what you're talking about, or is there something specific that you're using for a greener house? Is there a different material you're using?
We're using gypsum wallboard in Green New Deal housing, but there are methods for like using like a clayey material and sort of like in place of plaster. That's one more natural way of finishing materials on the inside.
Yeah, and in central Minnesota, there's a cob building, all used that cob, that type of material that they'll use on the inside. I've seen even preserved cob for tubs it's, I'm trying to remember the town, Park Rapids, or no, it's not Park Rapids. But there's a great, some great examples of what Leah's talking about for that cob. And others of us use, tongue and groove, and other things for interior. Does that affect things, Leah, in terms of the thermal? Is it okay to use wood lap for inside? Does that matter?
I mean, your interior finishing materials is not like the bulk of the insulation. Like that's mostly like the thick of the wall. Usually like insulation is going to pertain to like how thick that material is. Generally finishing is like a very like minuscule part of the insulation. It can contribute.
Anyone else wants to unmute to ask a question, provide suggestions, talk about things that they're feeling like their community really needs to embrace or start addressing or is a problem?
Yeah, Leah, I've got a curious question. The Green New Deal housing project, I was thinking the city would really immediately jump on it, like the policymakers, to respond to inequity. It's such a great idea. Why have they not?
That's a great question that has caused me a lot of frustration in the past year. I think I've touched on before, not in this presentation, but the city is really interested in funding projects with, they say, like the most impact with the least amount of resources. So one of the reasons that they're not jumping to fund Green New Deal housing is because it's a single family residence where they're trying to develop apartment blocks. So that's one reason. But hopefully as we get more interest, it'll develop.
And Cook County has some housing issues, I've heard. So are there solutions that people are thinking will help that out? Or, and we're hoping that this Green New Deal engineering and designs will become available for us outside of Duluth and other areas, because that's one of the challenges. Otherwise, you have to get a custom design. The idea is to mainstream designs.
There was a question in here. How much does a new Green Deal house cost?
That's a really difficult question to answer. Unfortunately, I don't know the price per square foot, but it's a difficult question to answer, mostly because like there will be a lot of price fluctuation when it comes to like buying the land and also like how sloped the land is. But they are expensive, more expensive than standard building, but it's sort of like the circular problem or this double-edged sword, because like I was sort of trying to get at how it's more expensive to build because builders don't know how to build that way, and they don't know how to build that way because of code and because it's not standardized, and it's not standardized because of policy. So I think it's more expensive, but it's more accessible because it's a lot more standardized in like Europe, for example. It's just not more standardized here. So yeah.
Thanks, Leah. There's a question in the chat. David, how did you choose the design of your summer residence?
Well, it's cheap. And one of the things we wanted, since we live in our off-the-grid home and we have so much luxury, where we live, we feel like we have so much, and there's computers and everything. We wanted our summer sleeping quarters to be connected with nature. So we did wood from the area for the floor. We did all natural preserves, and our canvas tent we can hear everything. We can hear the loons singing, we can hear crickets. And so the air is flowing through. So it's for us, we wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of modern living in our off-the-grid home. And that's why we've done that. And I think we're going to put it up Wednesday night or Thursday and get there a few days earlier. Normally we're in May 1st. And there's only a few nights that once I get into the 20s, we don't stay there, but a nice canvas wall tent that we also have, we put a screen thing over our bed. So we have a no-seam netting over our bed and then screening the rest of the area because we don't want to have bugs where we sleep.
Yeah, it would be nice if I know co-housing is a very old, it's like how people used to live, but it would sure be nice in Grand Marais to have something like that with different generations and people sharing things like that up here. And then the other thing I guessed cold storage unit in Grand Marais, but I don't really know what it is. If someone could explain what a cold storage unit is.
I think I seem probably like the better person to answer that because I talked about it, but I do wonder if David might be better because I think he has a relationship with them and he's actually
Yeah.
farmed.
In this case, it's not root cellars. It's actually a walk-in cooler. And this is, so some of the farmers don't have electricity or refrigeration space. So having a place in town that these coolers, so Melinda and Diane Booth are working on that to get more accessibility, stretch out the season. So I think that'll be a real good asset. And they're just getting the money now. And so hopefully, and they were second place of our competition with initially 17 project proposals, and they were one of the 7 finalists, and then they came in second. So it's a nice project, ready to go, and it'll just enhance the capacity.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
And I don't know if there's any other questions, but I know from Joel, Lee, and I were very thankful to be invited to this space, and thankful you all joined. And hope you'll join and lead and along the way as we try to come up with solutions for what we want our world to look like in the future. So I want to thank you personally.
Yeah, David, we're so glad to have you guys here. I think this conversation is one that we keep having in different ways through higher ed presentations. And it's just an interesting place to see where the conversation goes and where it leads us into the future. Again, we still have some time, so feel free to put in some questions in chat or ask your individual questions. I was just looking up, David, on a side note, wasn't there a greenhouse that was doing deep, like winter greenhousing?
Yeah, that's actually a regional sustainable development partnership project. Before I was the director of it, I put in an application to be a host in Finland for one. And so the Deep Winter Greenhouse was built at the Agroecology Center. And I know there's real interest in building others, including Grand Portage. And they've been down looking at it for building a bigger, larger Deep Winter Greenhouse. And what it does is it has storage of rocks underneath the greenhouse floor. And those rocks get filled with the hot air being drawn into the rocks. So the rocks become like a heat storage. So as long as it's sunny, when the first year we ran it, we had the heater almost never came on. It was sunny a lot. So the rocks heat up and then they give off their heat through the same system in the evening and night. And, you know, it can be 10 below and it's going to be 80, 90 degrees in that. Deeply insulated, perfectly designed for winter use. So again, like Leah said, it's a high input up front, but then you don't have to pay the ongoing cost of heating. So we have to figure out how to get that balance between housing, between greenhouses, so that we have a little more input, so we save a lot of output later. And, you know, think about low-income housing. You don't want a high energy bill. So what is it, you know, how good is it if you build a really cheap house and you give it to a low-income family with almost no insulation, then their burden of energy is ongoing. So we have to figure out how to prioritize our monies, our resources to build quality buildings that will last for generations. I've actually walked in a house in Switzerland, 700 years old, and it was made out of wood. So how can we build for durability, for insulative factors, for comfort? Those are the questions we are trying to ask and research and answer. And I'm really hopeful with Leah and Joel, next generation coming up, because they've got incredible heads and they're going to help change the world, and we can help them change the world by doing what we can with them. along the way.
Well, on that note, would you guys maybe each choose something that you guys talked about tonight to highlight, or something else that you think gives you such hope for tomorrow, of the things that you're super excited to see what's going to happen next?
Well, I'll go first because for me, working with Joel and Leah provides me great energy and great hope to have such smart people, so engaged, problem solving, system thinker, doers. We have a lot of hope with some of the incredible next generation coming up. And we just have to move out of the way or help blaze the trail, but certainly not be in the way of the solutions. Leah, Joel?
I think for me, what gives me hope is actually getting outside and doing the work. I think things can seem really scary when you're looking at climate change charts from behind the screen, but you get outside and see the birds singing, things are still going, and just takes one step at a time.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there, like, I had an apathy toward not an apathy, but sort of like this hopelessness before, and there was some type of shift that I had, and I think a big part of it was moving out here because I grew up in New York, and this is my first time in the Midwest, and I've just really fallen in love with Duluth, and I've fallen in love with the community that I've met here, because they're just so tight knit and so hardworking, and just like really forging the world that they want to see. So that's what gives me hope, and yeah, I think we have a lucky bunch of people out in this part of the country. So.
Thank you so much, you guys. I want to say we are just grateful to have you come talk tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I encourage you to hang out a little bit longer. I am going to stop recording just in the off chance